there's very little opportunity to move outside your specialization once you get to college. And so most graduates of European universities have a very narrow set of knowledge, whereas certainly with the sort of liberal arts-based approach to college education here, most of you graduate in America have a broader set of skills and a broader set of knowledge. So you're already ahead, which is great. But I do think it sort of encourages us to in terms of education, to give people the experience of other disciplines, to find forms of educational experience that aren't necessarily always the kind of the sort of classic teacher class kind of lecture-based forms of, but perhaps more experiential. I mean, for instance, we helped create this thing called D-School at Stanford, which is a graduate institute that allows the opportunity for business school grad students and medical school and engineering school grad students and school of education grad students all to come together and do design together. And by doing it together, they not only understand design, but they start to understand each other's disciplines, and because they're kind of participating in it. And I think more of those kinds of educational experiences are quite important.
Okay. I just have one last thing before we open up to the audience. What can high school students like us do to prepare ourselves to become more like design thinkers?
I think some of the things I already said. So get comfortable with the idea of experimentation. Get comfortable with the idea of not always knowing the answer before you start the journey. I know that can seem challenging and scary sometimes, but I think it's important. Get comfortable with making things. And I don't necessarily mean in the craft sense. I'm not saying go spend all your time in the wood shop, although I think that's a really healthy thing to do. But this, at the heart of design thinking is going from the abstract to the real, going from what comes out of people's heads and making those things real in the world, and having the physical skills of doing that, whether it's photography, whether it's making things in shops out of wood and metal, whether it's the ability to draw. You can do it through the written word also. Whether it's making movies, movie making and is a great way of bringing ideas to life. But getting comfortable with those ways of thinking and doing and being, I think is an important thing to start on early, because those skills take quite a long time to acquire. I mean, Malcolm Gladwell talks about this notion of the 10,000 hour rule. But it takes 10,000 hours to become really skillful at anything. So you're a musician, right? You know how many hours it takes to get skillful at it. It takes hundreds and thousands of hours to get skillful at drawing or at making. So start early would be my advice.
Okay. So I'd like to open up to the audience if any of you have questions for Mr. Brown. Roshan?
So you said that you should be open to experimenting and all that. Like, so of all the products that you guys design, about how many of them, what percentage do you guys get immediate success, and how many of them do you get keep experimenting many times?
Projects, if you look at them as individual things, hard to say what the immediate impact rate of them is. It's low in innovation in general. I would say what happens is in any given topic, we over time, as we do more work in an area, we sort of learn how to have more impact. So perhaps in the early days, for instance, when we were designing things like laptop computers and things, we got better and better at those. The first one was pretty successful, but because it was the first one, so nobody had ever made one before. So in that sense, it was successful, right? But we got better and better at knowing how to make these things, and that's true of anything we do. So we're very lucky that we do get a chance to tackle problems in certain domains kind of over and over again. So I suppose that everything in that sense is an experiment, and it's an interesting balance to get between wanting to move from one completely new problem to another, to sticking with something long enough that you actually learn about it and develop some depth and some knowledge about it.
Yeah, Brian?
Yeah, what was was the biggest challenge you faced with starting Ideo?
Well, I didn't start it, so I'm on the one hand I'm speaking for the folks that did. There were David Kelly, who was the primary founder, who's still around and still works at Ideo, would say, like almost any other business, I think, was finding somebody to pay your bills. You know, actually finding somebody who wants what you do is always the biggest challenge of starting a business, or certainly what seems it at the time. In fact, I think the biggest challenge which he succeeded just spectacularly at was setting a culture that was going to sustain for a long time. I mean, we've been going now, he started his business in the late 1970s, so we've been going a while. And the thing that, you know, when I took over as CEO was the absolutely most valuable asset we have, and still do have, is a culture that's really good at doing what it does and really wants to do it, and that attracts other really great people who want to be part of it. That's a tremendously valuable thing. And so thinking about what kind of place you want to be and what kind of people you want to be around. I mean, David wrote a letter when he first created the company, which to actually one of the other guys he was trying to persuade to come and work for him, which said something along the lines of, you know, I'm kind of tired of working for big companies. I want a company where I can work with my friends. And that was the beginning of the kind of core of the culture that he wanted to create. And it's kind of still there at Ideo today, and has been the most influential thing out of all the things he could have done at the beginning. I think that was the most important.
So there's a lot of talk about what the world is going to look like when the generation that's grown up with and on the internet sort of takes over. And I was wondering what you think this impact will be regarding how people think about problems, how people communicate, because there's a strong force sort of between two sides that think it's isolating us further, and a side that thinks it's connecting our world even more.
I think we're only about 5% of the way down the journey of what the internet really means, so it's way too early to tell. Everybody thinks the internet's done, and it isn't done. It's not even partly done. You know, I mean, the first wave of the internet wasn't really about collaboration at all. It was about publishing. The second wave of the internet was about the beginnings of collaboration in relatively crude ways. And I think we've got many more waves to come. And so ultimately, I believe that the internet is the beginning, and there'll be other technologies that play important roles here, of us becoming, you know, a far more collaborative society than we've been in the past. And it may take us more than this generation to figure that out, as it took us more than one generation to figure out industrialization in the late 1800s, the mid 1800s in Europe. You know, you could argue that, you know, the Brits did the first, you know, the sort of entrepreneurs in Britain did the first round of industrialization, and the Victorians, and then the United States kind of took over and took it to a whole new place, and then created the consumer society out of the, you know, after the Second World War. So that there's this sort of, it took many generations to figure out what industrialization meant, and the same will be true of the internet. I think we can be a bit impatient sometimes, and a little bit dramatic in our assumptions about how these technologies play out. But I do honestly think the outcome ultimately will be a society that's able to share, inspire, and kind of create together in a way that just wasn't possible before.
We have time for maybe one or two more. Alex?
What was the hardest thing you ever designed?
Sure, I mean, almost everything that I design feels like it's the hardest thing I've ever designed when I'm designing it. Because on the one hand, it wouldn't be interesting if it wasn't a hard problem. And on the other hand, you know, you find the design process of, you get to a place, always in the design process, you feel completely lost. You're sort of swimming in all of this stuff, and you're not sure whether you've got a good idea or any good ideas, and it's really hard. It feels really hard. So